I really want to give you guys a sneak peek into the UMP Lite. Hopefully you've already seen the video I did before about the course. We've made a bit of a change to it. What we're doing now is we give the people a video to watch ahead of time. The videos aren't more than 30 minutes long. They get an accompanying workbook with questions in it to fill in. And then we meet up together as a group on Zoom and we spend an hour discussing it. And what I'm going to do now is just show you the contents of the course. We're going to kick off the course by looking at multi-ethnic and multi-class church. Often when people say, oh, we've got a multi-ethnic church, when you have a look at it, not always, but often you see that it is mono-class. So you will see that, yes, there are different ethnicities, but everyone is middle class. So it is multi-ethnic, but it's mono-class. Can we be the kind of churches where people feel really welcome? That if they come from a different ethnicity to the dominant culture of our church, that they still feel loved. And when they turn up, they sense the love of God. And if they come from a different class to the majority of people in our church, that when they come, they feel loved. And I've found that those things don't just happen just from having a love for people, but they do actually also involve us thinking about, okay, how do I communicate? As if I'm from a dominant culture, how do I communicate to sub-dominant cultures? If I'm always in the majority, how do I make minorities feel when they're around me? And a lot of these things we're not often aware of until we really think about them. So how does the gospel spread across cultures? We can see this in the book of Acts, right? So in Acts 11, verse 19, you've got Hellenistic Jews who it says they shared the gospel only with Jews. Okay, so Luke is very honest. He says that they were only sharing the gospel with people who were like themselves, other Jews. Now, this actually is something that we see done a lot today in church planting. It's called the homogeneous unit principle, trying to reach just one culture. Of course, one of the problems that a lot of us have recognized over the years is that it does lead to segregated churches in the UK. Look at Acts chapter 11, verse 20. Luke's already admitted that the people were only sharing the gospel with the Jews. And then in verse 20, he says, but some of them from Cyrus and Cyrene spoke also to Greeks. Now, these guys from Cyprus and Cyrene are Hellenistic Jews. And Luke's pointing out that some of them bucked the trend. They said, we're not just going to speak to people like us. We're going to speak to people who are similar to us because they're Greek, because they're Hellenistic, like we are Hellenistic Jews. But they're different to us because we're Jews and they are not Jews. And I think what Luke's doing is showing us how Acts 1 verse 8 gets fulfilled. So as people start joining your church and you get different people from different cultures joining, you start to get some conflict because different cultures have different ways of thinking about things. And sometimes what happens is we judge other cultures and how they think about things by the way that we think about things. And you get something that's called ethnocentrism, which causes problems in churches. So we're going to look at that today. We're going to look at ethnocentrism and how different cultures think. It's important to look at this so that we can learn to love one another better in the church. Let's say you're British and you say that Brazilian is always late. 10 a.m. means 10 a.m., right? That is judging Brazilian culture by British culture, right? That's an ethnocentric judgment. If we make Jesus the benchmark instead of British culture, we see that he didn't operate on European time values, right? Sometimes Jesus was late and he didn't have a watch. We want to be careful about this because we want to be a church where we really try to understand one another's perspectives first rather than jumping in with judging from where we come from. So what happens is we end up incorrectly importing in sometimes sinful parts of our culture that we don't realize because we haven't critiqued our own culture yet. We bring in sinful parts of our culture, and at the same time, the people we're trying to reach, or the people who've just started coming to our church from a different culture, we start condemning bits of their culture that aren't sinful. So years ago, I'm a young pastor on a council estate, and I don't know a lot, but I've been around Christian circles and had training for ministry, and problems would come up that I wasn't too sure what's the best way of dealing with. So, for example, one problem would be someone saw a crime committed by someone who's in a gang and is asked by the police to be a witness in court. But on the steps of the court, you've got the whole gang sitting there waiting to see who's going to be the witness who's brought in and is hidden as a secret witness. But then this person's identity is going to be revealed. And then you've got this dilemma of, well, it's dangerous for this person, but should they stand up for truth anyway? And will the police give them the proper protection? And that they're not going to give them the proper protection. You've got to weigh these things up. And I was like, well, boy, none of the books I've got tell me this, and none of the resources I've been pointed to in the past deal with this. So I've got to kind of just go through the Bible myself and try and work out what to do. And that is called self-theologizing. When there's a problem that comes up in your culture and you say, all right, let's go to the Bible and try and see what does the Bible say about this problem. This is self-theologizing. We're now going to look at contextualizing the church. What does that mean? Well, we're talking about being a church that prophetically speaks and acts in the local context. First, let's just talk about what do I mean when I say contextualization. And I've been really influenced by Dean Fleming, who wrote a book about contextualization in the New Testament. Contextualization has got to take a two-pronged approach. The first is identificational, okay, where you present your message in a way that people can identify with it. The second thing is transformational, where you present the message in a way that people's thinking is transformed, okay? Now, that's Dean Fleming talking about how the New Testament writers did contextualization in their writing. I want to apply that to the church and say that church contextualization is when you make your church, firstly, identificational, so that it's people in your neighborhood identify with it to a certain point. And secondly, it's transformational, so that people's thinking and lifestyles are transformed by it. So now we're going to look at how to preach to multiple cultures all at once. This is whether you're preaching a sermon, or you're doing an evangelistic talk, or you're doing like a youth group session. We're talking about how you could give the good news to people, how you could give Bible truths to people in a way that you're talking to people from different classes and different ethnicities all at the same time. Let's kick off with 1 Peter 3:15, okay? It says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have, but do this with gentleness and respect. One of the things I think we get from this is that we need to be prepared. And there's two ways we need to be prepared. One is we need to know the gospel. We need to know the Bible. Whenever we're preparing a talk, we want to make sure that we understand the biblical truths that we're sharing with people, and that we understand the Bible passage that we're sharing with people. But there's another type of preparation we need, which is we need to understand the cultures that we're preaching the gospel to. And I think the Apostle Paul is a great example of this. He clearly had already done the preparation work to understand different cultures before he preached to them. We're going to move on to urban discipleship. This is an area that over the years that I've been chatting to people, this is the area where I see a lot of people have experienced a lot of pain, particularly where people from a subdominant culture have been discipled by someone from a dominant culture. And often a lot of this stuff isn't obvious to people from dominant cultures, and people can, after a few years of discipling someone, walk away and say, yeah, I did a great job, not knowing that someone actually at the receiving end of their discipleship experienced a lot of pain. So it's an important topic to look at. It's also an important topic because it's a big part of being a Christian, discipleship. So we should be becoming more like Christ. Now, this does not mean becoming like the dominant culture, okay? In the UK, time and time again, I've heard people from subdominant cultures say that they were discipled in a way that was designed and trying to make them become like a white middle class person. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a white middle class person, but there is a problem if our discipleship is actually geared towards making people who aren't white and aren't middle class start acting white and middle class. Jesus should be the benchmark. Same way, because we want to disciple people to become more like Christ, we want to be careful that when we're discipling someone, we are not trying to make this person the image of who we dream that they will become. We often have an idea, oh, I'd like this person to become like this and do this, this, and this. But instead, we want to think, as this person gets discipled, they should become a unique combination of who they were created to be and what Christ is like. And when we're discipling someone, because we are not omniscient, we don't know everything, we can't be too sure what it will actually look like. So we need to disciple people in a way where we are not determining the outcome, we're letting God make the outcome happen. We will come on to how we do this in a minute. But for now, I just want us to understand when we disciple people, we've got to be careful that we're not kind of making a mold that we're trying to squeeze people into. So me personally, I've been through a whole big journey with my voice, right? I kind of went through a season where I talked in a middle class way. And then I was like, no, that's not who God made me to be. And I went back to a working class way. And there's a couple of different dialects that we would use on our estate, depending on who we're talking to. And then, of course, everyone's got their telephone voice as well, you know. And I even worked a job where I used a public schoolboy voice for the whole time for that job. And would come home, come back to the estate in the evening and switch back and stuff. And then I remember someone encouraging me to kind of be more of a loudmouth, you know, and kind of being like, well, that's who God made you to be. And to kind of preach that way, where I was kind of like almost like shouting as I preached and that. And I really felt like, I don't feel this is the journey God's got for me. And certain things happened, certain ways that God was leading me and that the gospel was being applied to my heart that were bringing a softness inside that started changing the way I spoke. And I feel that is, for me personally, that's the kind of change we want, where the change is coming from inside rather than from outside factors that are trying to pressure you to talk a certain way to please certain people or to not be judged by people and so on. I hope this sneak peek has been helpful to you. Contact me if you want to sign up for the course. I look forward to hearing from you.